What is crack-a-lackin', fellow thermonuclear AFers? I am Dan Favale, once again coming at you with my certified fantabulous co-host, Grant Hughes. Before we dive into this excellent mailbag filled with questions from our Discord listeners, which you should join them, go to our Discord. The link is in our podcast and YouTube description. Before we get into that, our usual housekeeping notes, including join our Discord, but also please remember to subscribe to us wherever you're consuming us. If this is the first time checking us out on YouTube, hit like, subscribe, comment, help the algorithm love us back. Subscribe to us on whatever podcast player you're using, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, the whole nine. Throw out recommendations if you've already subscribed to us to friends, family members, acquaintances, random people on the street, enemies, people you work with, anyone who you think might enjoy sub-mediocre NBA basketball takes. And then follow us on all the socials at HardwoodKnocks on Twitter and TikTok, at Hardwood_Knocks on Instagram. With all those housekeeping notes out of the way, Grant, since I last spoke to you like 3 seconds ago, how the hell are you doing?
Unlike everything with the Atlanta Hawks, I'm totally fine.
Wow. How's that as a jumping off point and for what we're about to get into?
Yeah, we'll get to them shortly. I'm going to lead us off with our first mailbag question. This is from Kilhaas, and it goes as follows. Is it harder to build a championship team with a point guard as your best player? He says, listening to the roster building strategy we talked about last time, and pointed out the fact that the best point guard in recent years, just best point guards in recent years, have not been on title contenders, except for Steph, who, as we discuss almost every week, is just an anomaly and plays in a different system that kind of de-emphasizes the point guard position. So, great question. It does tie into what we were talking about last week, and we've talked about before of like, what do you need to win a title? And basically, yeah, it is hard to build a championship team with a point guard as your best player. Just so look at historical precedent, right? If you go back, just say 30, 40 years, however far you want to go. So in terms of finals MVPs, you got Chauncey Billups in 2004. So, okay. I mean, that's a like an anomaly in itself, because that Pistons team was just kind of 5 really good players among the starters. And I've made the case before, trying to think about, do you need a top 10 player to win a title? And said that a couple of those years, Ben Wallace, in terms of his overall impact, was probably a top 10 player, did it all with defense, and nobody really understood it at the time, although he did win a bunch of Defensive Player of the Year awards, but that's just not the same as being an MVP level guy. So I would quibble with Billups being the best player on that team, but there's one data point that says you sort of can do it. And then you go to Isaiah Thomas in 1990, which is almost, again, I think he's closer to what you're looking for as my point guard is my best player and we won a title. But then that's still kind of the same thing with, again, Detroit. There's just a bunch of defenders around and, other supplementary pieces that you could maybe argue had really close to the same value. So different. Magic Johnson's different. He's almost like a Steph level anomaly. I don't know what to do with that. But so, yeah, I think you got to have good ones. You got to have good point guards. Drew Holiday, Kyle Lowry, Kyrie Irving, Tony Parker, just going back over the last little while. But you can do it with unremarkable ones. Like you get your Mario Chalmers, you get your Derek Fishers. You clearly don't need a great point guard, and certainly don't need him to be your best player. I think the main thing is, if you're trying to figure out why, two thoughts come to mind, and tell me what you think of both of these. The first is that I think say you have a Chris Paul type point guard and the Suns were close, but I've been thinking about this since the Clipper days, where if you're just a pick and roll team and this undersized guy has the ball all the time and you're doing the same thing every time, that's one, not that difficult, even if you're great at it, for a defense to scheme against. And two, there's probably a way to go at that guy on the other end. If he's just like a 6 foot, or in Chris Paul's case, smaller, like true distribute the ball point guard. Too predictable, too many potential ways to go at that. The other thing is, if your point guard is your best player and he's a conventional point guard, I think then by default, it means you don't have a superstar wing, which, if you're looking for the commonality among title winners over however long you want to go back, that's the thing that you need. And before that, it was a dominant big guy. It's never been a dominant point guard. So if your point guard's your best player, it means that the wings and the bigs, depending on how far you want to go back, are not your best. And we know that you need your Michael Jordans, you need your LeBrons, your Kawhis, your, whatever you want to, Larry Bird, Matt, whatever. So just having a really good point guard, it's almost like a giveaway that your team is not equipped to win based on the teams that have won in the past. So what do you think about, one, the like Chris Paul model and why that's maybe not the best, and two, if you have an additional thought on like why, if you have a great point guard that's your best player, why it doesn't work?
Yeah, going off your points first, so Chris Paul with the Clippers, I don't know, was he actively targeted on defense in the playoffs during those? Like, the
No.
first time I remember it is just like Dallas going after him really while he was with Phoenix. But what I think you're kind of onto something is that if your point guard's your best player, you don't have a superstar wing. I think there are two things. It doesn't counter that, but one is just like, because you went so far back that this doesn't necessarily apply, but positional ambiguity factors in here to where like LeBron is a point guard and now Luka is a point guard. So are you going to say that like your best player can't be Luka or LeBron? LeBron's already disproven that.
Right.
What I am wondering though is like, so if you have that resource, not even talking about necessarily money, but you have the point guard as that guy and you've decided that's your best player, have you decided to then misallocate your resources elsewhere to where are you focusing on, well, we need play finishers to get around him rather than another creator on the wings, or sort of like I don't want to say the Giannis type because there is no such thing as a Giannis, but like the combo forward type of playmaker who can put the ball in his hands. And so I'm wondering if once you have that point guard, even like look at a Damian Lillard in Portland, like if you just decided, like, have you made it harder for yourself to get not even just a superior, but maybe more of offensive diversification out of the other spots on your roster because you've decided this steps on the toes of like, oh, we'll run pick and roll all the time, like you said with Dame, but like Dame can do other stuff as well. And yet, whether this is because Portland tried and failed, it's just you fall into the trap of like, well, we don't need to make this a priority because we have Damian Lillard. And so I'm wondering how much that might factor into the rest of the roster building construction.
Yeah, I mean, you've got finite resources and you've got finite touches and roles and opportunities, certainly offensively. Bringing up Lillard is interesting. That just makes me, and you're right, like Chris Paul was not a target, but I think in terms of the way, certainly now, the way offense is played now, it's really hard if you got a guy that's a one position defender that is going to be involved in a lot of actions because it's still a pick and roll heavy league, and he's not a good defender. Like that's tough to overcome, like that's going to apply. I mean, now it's making me think of like Ja Morant because he's the Grizzlies' best player. And we've very recently done a podcast where I said I thought the Grizzlies were the best team in the West. And I did not factor in the thought of like, he's a bad defender and he's going to be on the floor all the time. So even if you're not a great opposing offense, you're going to have a guy to go at. True of Damian Lillard, true of Trae Young, true of, I mean, certainly Chris Paul recently. I think I don't know. We just need someone to buck the trend and we need to see proof of concept. But so far, I just, maybe it is the resource allocation. Like it's not, and like you said, it's not money. It's just that if
the
we've
Clippers
decided
using the
this is
example,
our,
it's like Blake Griffin and DeAndre Jordan. It's you invested your money in play finishing bigs.
Yeah. And what's your, the best versions of those teams, it's like you had JJ Redick as just, it was like, you asked him to do one thing. You asked him to shoot. Like there was no secondary. I guess Blake like
He wasn't
developed
just a
into
play
good,
finisher. That's unfair to him. Towards the
well,
like
right. No,
talent.
but the theory of that team was very much Chris Paul is orchestrating everything. Yeah. And yeah, I don't know. Yeah. Well, you brought up LeBron and Luka too. I mean, is that just a size thing? Like, is that just that because they're big enough to not be, vulnerable on certain switches? Or maybe what it is they can guard different positions. And so you can just put more size and versatility everywhere else. I don't know. It's not really a point guard thing. To me, it's like a small guard thing. It's hard if a small guard is your best player more than anything.
Yeah, I think that's the best way to frame that for sure. Let's move on to this next one, which is mine, I believe, or if it's not, I'm looking at the wrong mailbag document. Excuse me. So, well, this is one really for both of us. It's Nikola Chekolov asks, I can't believe I'm asking this, but can Sacramento win a playoff series, assuming they are in 4 to 5? What would be their best matchup? Let's have these Kings fans dream a little. And so playoff series is, and look, the Kings are just they're fourth in the West as we record this right now, which is just absolutely bonkers. And I'm sort of wondering, like, when you're looking at the 4-5 matchup of the potential options, is their best matchup kind of already there? It's the Mavericks, just because they're so Luka centric. That I know Luka's a killer in the playoffs. I know what he's kind of threatened to do to the Clippers defense in years past, and the Kings defense is not on that level. But you have to worry really about one guy versus I don't want to, if the Warriors creep up, I don't want to have to deal with Steph. I just like, and that defense feels like it might have another gear if Draymond Green is healthy, even though the Warriors have struggled there. I don't want to deal with the Pelicans if I'm the Kings. You certainly don't want to deal with the Grizzlies or the Nuggets, and it doesn't matter. They're not falling to fifth. And I think I'm also just having trouble of, I guess you could say the Clippers because of how unhealthy they are. And just how much their offense has struggled. But just like the idea of like, well, if Kawhi and Paul George are both playing, that's not necessarily a team I want a part of. And then I also just can't see like the Jazz, the Blazers, the Timberwolves kind of come up to get to that fifth spot. This should be noted though, like a team like the Oklahoma City Thunder are 2.5 games out of number 5. And so like that, maybe you'd prefer that matchup if you're Sacramento, even though OKC just defends its ass off. But I would go with, I think the Mavs would be their best bet of the most realistic options. Do I think they can win a playoff series? No, I just don't think that they're going to have the defense to do it. Their offense is thermonuclear AF. And we've seen like they have some defensive highs, but there are going to be teams that are able to really go at them and their rim protection in the postseason. I don't think they have the level of wing defenders that you need. I mean, Davion Mitchell's been good. De'Aaron Fox has been better this year as well. And Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray like are kind of in the fine category. And they've gotten some good minutes from KZ Okpala. But like when you're looking at some of the wings that you're going to have to go up against in a prospective playoff series, they just don't have that guy to throw at them. And as we've talked about historically, like the context is to be successful in the playoffs, you need to have more of a balanced approach where it's the top 10 offense and defense goal. And I do think the Kings, their offense is top end enough to where there's some cushion to where the defense can be a little bit worse. I just don't know that the pinnacle of their defense is going to be good enough to beat pretty much any team that we've named to go. Like, if you go up against the Timberwolves or the Jazz or the Thunder, like we can have a conversation. But if it's the Mavs, if it's the Clippers, if it's the Warriors, I'm picking those teams over the Kings right now.
Yeah, I don't have a lot to add. I think my first thought was it's got to be a team that has a defense that's as bad or close to it as the Kings, because I don't have any confidence that they're going to be able to stop anyone on offense. So it's like you got to just be able to hope that you outscore, outshoot on the other end, 4 out of 7 times. So yeah, Dallas to me was the clear, best option of the nearby realistic ones. But I would even say, I think if you're the Kings, you'd probably rather see Denver than like a healthy New Orleans or a healthy Golden State, just because, you're going to base everything around Sabonis. And so that means you're going to necessarily engage Jokic on defense. And if you're looking for ways to do it, have Jokic be forced into positions where he's trying to track De'Aaron Fox in a pick and roll or like a handoff game, or be involved in covering handoffs to Kevin Huerter, like that kind of stuff. Like, I don't think there's any scenario where the Kings would beat the Nuggets, but I like that better than some of the other options. Obviously, if Portland were to come up and make it that high, seems unlikely. Utah the same way. Those are the other 2 teams I thought of as, just not good enough defensively. So you turn it into a shootout where both teams go for 130 points, and maybe the Kings, like that's the recipe for a Kings playoff win, is to just score enough to offset the 125 that they're going to give up.
Truly incredible that they're in the conversation for, I know that the margins are thin in the middle, like the Grizzlies and the Nuggets are cut above everybody else right now, but to be in the conversation for a top 4 seed, we're not trying to shit all of them. If they could make a trade, which we talked about encumbered picks in the previous podcast, like because of the way that their pick is, they sent out 2024 to Atlanta and it's protected until Kingdom Come. Mm-hmm. Are they going to be able to go out and get like a wing that could help? If they were able to trade for like even just a Josh Hart or something, or Josh Richardson might even help them. I don't know if that changes how I feel about this question, but that still seems like their biggest need.
Yep. Agree. This is another, both of us can handle it. So this is from Cosmic Raccoon. Or no, sorry. Where are we? Oh, this is another common one. I just read the wrong one. Moose Machine. What teams would you most like to be the GM of this deadline and why? Also, what would you least like to be the GM of and why? Throw that to you first.
I don't want to have to be the GM of the Lakers just because I don't want to be Rob Pelinka necessarily. And to have to make, regardless of what you think should have happened over the offseason, to now, let's just fast forward now, have to make the decision of whether to trade these distant firsts for a team that just can't win a title this year. Like, there's just no realistic outcome that the Lakers end up being champions because they use these picks. I just don't see that. I don't want to have to make that decision. In terms of it, I would love to be the GM of would be the Knicks because I would tear that motherfucker down.
Oh,
And it would
wow.
be
You're still there?
it would be so unexpected, and you'd be able to get like all of a sudden value for Julius Randle. You could see what else you're gonna like. I don't even know that I'd be focused on getting rid of like a Fournier or a Derrick Rose at this point. I'm probably not trading Jalen Brunson, but like, oh, what's Mitchell Robinson's value? Like, no, I am angling towards something bigger, better, something that's more aspirational than we just want to be like, oh, maybe we'll be in the conversation for a 4 seed in the East, but we're never going to win more than a single playoff series with this core. That's why I would want to be the GM of the Knicks to pivot. I actually would want to be I'd want to be David Griffin right now in New Orleans, just because there's so many different things you could do. And there's so many different guys that you could deem expendable, but not really. And I know that the trade market isn't like sexy at the moment, but like they're just built with their salary filler, the picks that they have, some of the players and prospects that they have. They're built to do so many different things that there's this endless optionality at their disposal. And so I'd love to be the Pelicans, but like as sort of this like sinisterism, I would love to be in charge of the Knicks and just be Leon Rose right now because I would blow everybody's minds with the sell job that I pull off.
It would be great to be David Griffin because you could just walk around exclusively strutting just because he was like so maligned for so long. We are not that far removed from like this guy's got to go. The Van Gundy hiring was terrible. What are we doing with all these picks? And then now like Jackson Hayes, now it's like, yeah, David Griffin's in good shape. I would add the Grizzlies to that because the Grizzlies can do whatever they want. They're
Stand
similarly,
pat. That's why I don't want to be the Grizzlies.
yeah, right. You might not need to do anything. The other two teams, I would want to be the Pistons and the Spurs because you can just sit out here looking like who wants to give us everything you have for Jakob Pertl and for our dead cap space and like you want to trade 3 future firsts for Bogdanovich? We're listening. Like you could just be the asshole because you're the only store that's open. You can charge whatever you want.
Would you want to be Masai to that end? Because what if you were just willing to burn it down?
I'm scared of being Masai because of the same reason, like the opposite reason, because like it seems like something needs to happen, except both extremes in terms of tearing it down or adding are very much in play. And I don't know which I would want to pick. I like the clear path. That's the Detroit San Antonio thing is fun. 2 more that I would not want to be GM of: the Atlanta Hawks, because that's already burning down. That's a tough spot. And the Cavs, because the Cavs have such a clear need and they don't have a good way to fill it. They need a small forward. They need a big wing that can shoot and defend because they're too small in the backcourt and they don't have enough shooting in a lineup that has Mobley and Jared Allen. It's like everybody knows what you need. Everybody also knows you don't have a lot of good resources to acquire it. And so you're going to get some tough offers like that are not, they're going to get held over a barrel a little bit. And your options are so limited that feels like a really constricted position to be in. But if you're the GM of the Cavs, your team is really good. So that helps.
This next one comes from Cosmic Raccoon. Fake trade for the offseason. This is going to set some things on fire. Jalen Green, KPJ, and a good first-round pick for Trae Young. Only reason I ask is because there's so much smoke about issues in Atlanta, and with a new GM, it seems like they may be ready to hit the reset button to some extent. So if they start looking to trade Trae, how competitive do you think that offer is? Do you want to take us through, before you respond to that trade offer, take us through the latest in all things Trae Young and Atlanta Hawks?
Yeah, I mean, jump in because I'll forget some of it, but basically, I mean, this is all to say that talking about what a good Trae Young return package would be is not like fanciful to me at this point. It's something you should be considering. So the Hawks have essentially, Travis Schlenk, who's the general manager, I don't know what his actual title was, but he was in charge of personnel and making decisions. He's gone. They said he went to a consulting role. It sounded like some comments from John Collins involved air quotes, and everybody agreed that like he had been retired, or basically it's like, yeah, sure, he's winking 50 times. Yeah, he's still in the picture. It doesn't seem to be. Landry Fields, who is a former player, who I think is like 34 or 30. I mean, is a young guy, has front office experience, but he is now in that position. Kyle Korver is involved. There's all the Nate McMillan, Trae Young stuff from earlier this year. There's also reports now that Trae Young chartered a private plane to leave after game 2 of a playoff series last year. Was it? I can't remember what it was. Bad look, whatever it was, the specifics. And that Nate McMillan essentially asked the wrestlers, ownership, Tony Wrestler and his son Nick, who's making decisions. I think it's Nick. Asked to be allowed to not coach the team anymore, and then was convinced to stay, even though nobody seems to think he's going to be there beyond this season. So, tire fire, basically, in addition to the Hawks underperforming and Trae Young not making threes. So that's where we are. That's where we are right now. And that's why this question is not totally out of left field.
So, and as far as the trade package goes, Jalen Green, KPJ, and a good first round pick for Trae Young. What's a good first round pick? Are we talking, are the Rockets putting their first round pick on the table for Trae Young this season? Because then
absolutely not. They will not.
You're not doing that because you're giving up on Wembanyama. So are they can't put their 2024 pick on the table. And so what you're looking at is, I guess the next best good first round pick would be their 2026 Brooklyn pick. I would assume, like, that's unprotected.
Yeah. So I think, even though we just ran off the laundry list of Hawks problems and Trae Young being at the center of a lot of them, I still think you're not getting out of this if you're the Rockets or anybody without like minimum 3 unprotecteds. I think, just because based on what the market bore, the Gobert, the Mitchell, the DeJounte stuff. I mean, it shouldn't cost less pick wise than it cost you to acquire DeJounte to get Trae Young if you're the Rockets. So, I mean, this doesn't do it. And I don't know what the team is that's going to come over the top with a ton of picks and, just basically let's give you our draft for 3 to 5 years and a player of like Jalen Green's caliber in terms of young assets. But like, so the answer to the question is I don't think that's a real competitive offer. It'd be one I would make, though, just on the off chance that,
so
the
would
Hawks
you
decide we got to get out of this.
If you're saying 3 first round picks, let's say Houston goes KPJ, Jalen Green, Milwaukee's pick this year, Brooklyn's in 2024, and Brooklyn's in 2026.
No, I need it to be like and this is why Houston's not a great candidate for this, because their picks theoretically are going to be valuable. I want like unprotected firsts in quantity from a team with real downside.
I'm with you in the sense of, it's like, I'm actually looking at the package as, that's basically Jalen Green and that Nets 2026 pick.
Right. Yeah, because you're gonna get guys in the high 20s or whatever potentially. I need like the potential to get 2 or 3 like top 10, high lottery, a couple top 5 picks out of this, I think. And I just shit on Trae Young and the Hawks, and like I think he's largely at fault for what's gone on there. But the fact is, I mean, he's still a really good player, and it might be the type of thing where in a different situation he learns from what's gone on here, and he's just back to being, the guy that leads the league in points and assists and is the reason your team is a top 3 offense with like not much around him. So it's a low point in his value, but the Gobert thing ruined the market. So it's like, what do you compare it to anymore? But I need a lot of lottery tickets for him.
Would you think, because we talked about in the previous episode how the superstar trade market hasn't really been reset, and that there's going to be a line drawn in the sand where you're not going to get those Gobert and Mitchell type packages. I still think, and I'm just curious what you would think, maybe you're not going to get what you ended up getting for Mitchell and Gobert, where it's all these immediate impact players plus immediate picks plus distant picks. But I still think this offseason, maybe not at the trade deadline, there are going to be teams that would be willing to go that route for Trae Young. I don't want to have to name them here. I think there'd be teams that would be interested on sort of just like a cursory basis. Like I think Orlando might look at him, even though he's fundamentally different from how they play. I could honestly see OKC looking at him. That wouldn't shock me. But like a team that might be closer to contention, I could still see them kind of making just like the bolt. Like I could see the Heat doing
Yeah.
it for sure, like going the 3 picks and 3 swaps route.
Mhm.
Could I see the Raptors doing it? He's below 6'7", so maybe not. But just like that's a team that should, if you want to
Mhm.
keep Siakam and Scott, like keep 2 of Siakam, OG Anunoby, and Barnes. So 2 of those guys are off the table. Then it's one of them, all the picks. Maybe you
Yeah.
include Fred VanVleet in a sign and trade. I mean, you could also make that offer now, but I think that if the Hawks do move Trae Young, they would get a kit and caboodle offer. Like I think it would be a pretty massive return.
I also think they should trade him. Like whether we're like talking about the could they definitely could, and there will be offers. I agree. I agree with you totally that there will be a team that is willing to give up a lot. But I feel it seems to me that whether you think he's the reason for everything going wrong, like he's at least whether it's causal, it's at least a pretty strong correlation at this point. And now, like how many relationships are fractured, between within the team, between Young and the front office, which like we've seen 2 coaches now. I think I just think it's how often does a situation like this reverse? And a year from now we're talking about like the Hawks are back, everything's fine. It just doesn't feel like it's trending that way, and I would kind of want to get out ahead of it if I could. If you got the right package.
Do you know which team should do it?
Who?
Should be in on Trae Young?
The Clippers.
No, the
I don't know.
Suns.
So what are you giving up?
Whatever they want. No, it's you're not giving up Mikal Bridges or Devin Booker. I'd give up Ayton if they wanted him. They won't. They have Capella. They have Onyeka Okongwu. Chris Paul's salary is just kind of floating around out there.
Yeah.
Let's get him to Atlanta all these years later when they probably should have drafted him. Picks. Would I put Cam Johnson on the table? I would consider it. But they have all their own picks. And so, like, if you're going for the pick-based package, and then, like, yeah, you could get, if Ayton's thrown in there, is he rerouted to a third team that gets you something? The Suns would just be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I mean,
And
they could
because you know
certainly.
why they'd be interesting? Because Devin Booker is scalable as fuck. Scalable
Right.
AF and can play next to anyone.
Yeah. No, I like that one.
I'm gonna
Let's
jump
see.
ahead to this because I want to leave the because you have one left, and then I want to leave the contender question for last. But Swag says, hoping the Celtics could target a wing before the trade deadline. Hauser's dropping out of the rotation. His performance across the season has plummeted from what we were getting in October, November. I hope the Celtics try and target a player such as Cam, Sadiq Bey, Jalen McDaniels. So any good wing targets for the Celtics who are not, they don't need a massive trade. They're not going to give up a ton. To Swag's point, Sam Hauser shooting 28% from 3 since the end of November, basically. If they wanted to go the wing route, they have to kind of think small. And so 3 names, Jalen McDaniels was a good one. I thought about Davon Reed from the Nuggets. And then also if the Suns decide to sell, Damian Lee could be a really good fit in Boston too.
Yeah, I didn't think about him. What do you think about Kelly Oubre? I know he's hurt, but if you could say he's going to be back for the playoffs, I don't know how you make that money work. Because really,
You'd start with Gallo, who's like that's that $6 million
you've got
salary.
Pritchard too. That Pritchard is kind of superfluous on the roster now. But yeah, if I'm the Celtics, I guess I want. So if you're upgrading that position, you'd like someone that could really defend or could really shoot. Ideally both, but you can't do that with their assets. So yeah, Damian Lee's a really good one. Let's see. Does Landry
Boston just
Shamet do
doesn't
anything for you?
what's that?
Does Landry Shamet do anything for you? Is he too small?
I think he's probably too. I'd probably rather just roll the dice on Sam Hauser, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like, could you go? Maybe this is too small, but he's cheaper. Garrison Matthews. Like, if that's the route you want to go, or maybe you want someone you're going to trust his shooting more than Sam Hauser. I don't know that you would trust him more than Sam Hauser in general, but and I mean, like, if you were looking to go let's not touch the core, but we want to get someone who makes some money. You have Gallinari at $6.5 million, and then you attach like a smaller salary to his so that you could bring back a $10 million player. And I just don't know like who really stands out for because now you need to attach something to that, and it's not going to be a first round pick clearly. And so it has to be on the lower scale there. I just don't know who necessarily falls under that umbrella, which is why it's so like, what about Gary Harris for them? You would still need to probably trade 3 players to get to his money. So that
Yeah.
makes that super tough.
No, I mean, Terrence Ross, like, is kind of the same way. You'd have to give up less for him than Harris. But I mean, really, Liz, talk about a first world problem. Like the Celtics just, Sam Hauser could just run hot, and then it would be like silly for us to even be talking about this.
Right. And so it's like even a Rocco, if you could get there, that's not someone that's going to be whatever. And the Clippers aren't going to give you a mere coffee.
Yeah.
Josh Richardson would be, I think, would be fine for this team, but you can't like Gallo. You can't send him back to San Antonio. They already like stretched and waived him, so that's tough. Utah doesn't really have like they have all these expendable players, but none of them are true wings. And so like that's not a team you could do business with. Detroit, like you're not getting in the Bojan Bogdanovic sweepstakes either. And so it's kind of tough for them there. Oubre's interesting. It's just so hard to get to his money, which is why it's like Jalen McDaniels is just inherently more intriguing. Would Portland look at like giving you Nas Little like after they extended him? And
he just got back too. I don't know. I think they like. I mean, I saw one good game out of him where he made a few threes. I think they like the idea of him. I think Portland. I mean, this isn't a Celtics guy, but like I think Portland's a pretty decent bet to try to move Josh Hart ahead of his player option for next year. And Little would be more valuable to the Blazers if Hart is gone, just because his role would increase.
A flyer on Cam would be fine,
yeah.
as Swag said, if you like don't really care about the shooting.
Yeah, we're very much in flyer territory. I think even Sadiq Bey is like, he lost his starting job for a while, but even that seems like that might be tough for the Celtics to come up with enough to, because if you wait a year, maybe Sadiq Bey's value goes up. If you're Detroit, you don't necessarily need to move him right now.
Imagine if they were just because they could get to the money. Imagine if they were willing to move a distant first round pick, 25 or 27, and they went after Kyle Kuzma.
Oh man, that would be. I mean, but you're definitely not re-signing him, right? I don't think. Yeah. Well, because it's going to cost too much, and you've got all these other obligations. I just can't imagine.
Well, Al Horford gets cheaper.
That's true. He goes to $10 million next year, right?
And then, like, if you have to, like, do you need both Derek White and Malcolm Brogdon at this point? And the Kuzma, if you're already in territory of what are they not going to pay Grant Williams? I would think they were going to pay him, so you could keep Kuzma instead of Grant Williams if you wanted to go that route.
Yeah. Do you think Kuzma is interested in being a piece on a winner, or does he want to be like? I think he might want to, but might be more interested in like I get to explore the space a little bit, which he sort of does right now. But I think he likes that.
That's fair, and he might have the markets where it doesn't matter. But I would think if they're just going to pay him, that like if after he kind of signed what became this below market deal, like this extension that he's wrapping up, I think maybe the money might talk there.
Yeah, maybe so. Yeah, that would be. I mean, it's hard to do better than that if you're Boston. Kuzma. I mean, unless
no one's talking about them as like, what if they went in and like went after that type of a player because they just don't have the salary matching. But if the Wizards decide to sell, Boston has first round picks to trade and like just they could step ladder their salaries there.
Yeah, that'd be interesting. All right, you want me to jump to this this next one here? This is fun. This is from Unbiased Pistons fan, and this doesn't even have to do with a Pistons player, so totally unbiased. How much sweetener would you need to give if you're the Timberwolves in a Rudy for Kessler trade? So using this as a springboard, I think we just need to make the comparison between the two, between Rudy Gobert and Walker Kessler, because obviously they're not going to do this trade. It's like a tongue-in-cheek question, but holy shit, like this is a question. And so here's the thing. All right. So let's just say we concede that all that really matters in comparing these two players are, you want rim protection, you want like some pick and roll finishing. You really don't need a lot of offense other than offensive rebounding, I guess, for this player type. These guys are just interior defender, shot deterrers, rebounders, essentially. So switching, getting out in space, passing, whatever, it's not super important. So just like of the basics that you need from these guys, here are some numbers. You can stop me whenever you want if one of these jumps out at you. So Rudy Gobert is allowing 56.9% on 7.2 field goals defended per game inside 6 feet, 56.9. Kessler's at 51.6. So over 5% better on slightly fewer 6 field goals defended inside 6 feet. Gobert knocks opponent rim attempt frequency down by 6.2%. That's in the 98th percentile. So guys like just try other options when Rudy Gobert is in the middle. That is still very much true. Kessler is at minus 4.1%. That's the 95th percentile among bigs. So maybe the 98th versus the 95th matters to you. Maybe it doesn't. In terms of opponent rim accuracy, so the finishing rate, when Gobert's on the floor, opponents finish 4.6% worse. Kessler 4.8% worse. So Kessler's got him there. Gobert's averaging 2 blocks per 100 possessions. Kessler is averaging 4.8 per 100 possessions. There is not a case for Gobert being a better rim protector, shot deterrer, shot blocker than Walker Kessler, who is a rookie this year, right now. So the other thing that really jumped out at me, and you can't always attribute this to centers, but so Kessler knocks down opponent accuracy in the mid-range, including short mid-range and all the other cleaning the glass. This is all cleaning the glass, short mid-range, and then mid-range overall at a 91st percentile clip. So not only do opponents not finish when Kessler is at the rim, they somehow don't make mid-rangers, I think, and floaters and stuff. So I think this is a testament to Kessler actually just moves better than Gobert, and he's out contesting these shots, and he's a factor outside the charge circle, basically, which Gobert, as the numbers show, are not. So in total contrast, teams go bonkers from mid-range and floater range when Gobert is on the floor this year. Their percentages in attempts and accuracy are way up. So the defensive piece is just like Kessler all the way, I think. So pick and roll, neither of them get the ball very much on offense. Gobert gets about 2 per game as the roll man. Kessler is barely under 1. 71st percentile in scoring efficiency for Gobert, 74th for Kessler. Small piece, Kessler is at least comparable. Rebounding, Gobert 17.9 per 100, Kessler 17.4 per 100. Kessler's better on the offensive boards. I just don't know where to keep going. It's so stupid that this is a comparison. Kessler has a higher true shooting percentage, higher assist rate, lower turnover rate. His box plus minus is like 5x better than Gobert's this year.
You don't have to feed him post-ups or try to get him to do something with the ball in his hands.
Doesn't seem to piss off every teammate he's ever had. The on-off stuff is all Kessler. Even if Gobert's defensive on-off split is actually a little bigger, he cripples the Wolves offense this year. I think if you're looking for a silver lining, Gobert has been part of elite offenses in Utah, and Donovan Mitchell had a bunch of quotes recently about how it just takes time to figure out how to play with him. So charitably, Gobert has a lot of offensive upside in terms of his impact. But the fact is that right now Kessler is just a better player in terms of all the stuff we just went through and on-off stuff. You can absolutely make the case that Walker Kessler is a better player than Rudy Gobert right now today. And the arrows on their careers are Xing, one's headed down, one's headed up.
The one thing to add to this, by the way, Walker Kessler, 1.5 mid-range blocks per 36 minutes. Rudy Gobert, 0.5 mid-range blocks per 36 minutes. And even if you go raw totals, Kessler has 35 mid-range blocks this year to Rudy Gobert's 15. So it's just a totals thing. The contracts as well, as you sort of just mentioned also with the aging curves. I think you can say Walker Kessler right now is the more valuable asset than Rudy Gobert, even if you don't believe he's the better player, which might just be a stretch, because you do have to look at sort of there's the issue of expectations, the level of competition that Kessler goes up against in more limited playing time than Gobert does. Look at his surroundings. I don't think Kessler's not surrounded by a bunch of great defenders, but the Wolves were very much doing this just experimental gambit to an extreme. So I'd be reticent to say that Walker Kessler is a better player than Rudy Gobert right now. He is certainly the more valuable asset than Rudy Gobert right now.
Yeah, buried in all this is that Gobert just plays a lot more per game. And Kessler has been a starter, but I mean, that has to matter. I just think it's wild that we're not that far from this trade happening, the Wolves Jazz trade. And as we look at it now, I mean, the joke is what would the Wolves have to throw in to get Kessler for Gobert? A lot is really the
contract factors into it now too, the age in the contract
as an asset. It just independent of the fact that it's a question, the fact that you can't actually make a case for Kessler being the better player this year is crazy. And then that's independent of all the other stuff you'd look at in if you're talking hypothetical trade, because Kessler makes a fraction of what Gobert makes. All the team control stuff that comes with rookie scale deals.
Also, the Timberwolves quite literally can't sweeten the trade.
They already sweetened the deal before, so now it's just I don't know. Do you have to throw in Anthony Edwards? Is that what we're talking about? Is that to get it done?
Um, okay,
Tough look.
Let's go on to this next one from the Farkas. Biased Nuggets fan here. Recent rumors of Nerlens Noel being moved and possibly to Denver is a feasible route for the Nuggets to attain Nerlens Noel without giving up important. Is there a feasible route to the Nuggets acquiring Noel without giving up rotational players based on salaries? It could look something like Nerlens and Magruder / Livers for Jeff Green, Ish Smith, Peyton Watson plus draft capital, presumably a second. Which side wins the theoretical trade? And if you're the Nuggets, do you do this to bolster your abysmal bench defense, or what's the least important backup spot be behind Jokic? So I'll go here first. I just wouldn't do this trade if I'm Denver because I feel like Noel can end up being a buyout candidate, and then to sort of give up on Peyton Watson and then just any second round draft capital, that doesn't really move the needle for me. As I mentioned on the previous podcast, this isn't a license to not make a trade, but the bench has outscored opponents without Jokic by 6 points since the start of January. If you were to make a trade, I just think you set your sights smaller to where you don't need to consolidate so many salaries, because that gets tough midseason where we're talking about, 3 for 2 is fine, but if you need to go 3 for 1, that's just so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
If Phoenix decides to sell, Bismack Biyombo would be really interesting in Denver. Been a really good rim protector this year. Nick Richards in Charlotte, Drew Eubanks in Portland. I think that's the level of backup big that you're feasibly looking at, to where you don't have to. I'd just be shocked if they said, "Oh, we're going to give up on Peyton Watson right now." I don't know what they value him long term, but that's the equivalent of a first round draft pick to them at this point, and it would depend on who they were getting back. If Noel ends up on the buyout market, though, or if any of this guy, they should certainly be a team that kicks the tires on that.
I think I hadn't even thought of the buyout stuff. I agree. I don't think I would do this either. One, because I'm not sure how much it matters what you get out of the center minutes behind Jokic. I think it's more important if you could go find somebody else that could be a help defender with him potentially. If there's a scenario where, because now you just care about which 5 guys can be on the floor in the big minutes for Denver. If there's, I don't know if you can necessarily upgrade Denver's best 5 players, but you're looking for someone that in a pinch, I think could fly around and do stuff off the ball. And Noel can sort of do that, but he's a center. The buyout thing's interesting because we've talked all this, over and over about how the trade deadline is going to suck and it's going to be tough to pull off trades. I mean, doesn't that maybe mean that the buyout market might be really good? Because all these guys that teams can't move or, can't get the right price for, Noel being a perfect example, could just be available. And then Denver should be at the front of the line for guys like that because it's a contender and there's a need. Like, I think nobody likes patience. It's not fun, but I think waiting on the buyout market might really be the sort of the best return for a team like Denver and some others.
I just don't know what. I agree with what you said. What Denver could use more than just a back. I mean, a backup 5 is fine, but you have Zeke Naji, who I'm still really high on. Just what's the player that even ends up on the buyout market or is even realistically feasible, low end trade? Like Nick Richards, you could probably try to play with Jokic, but how far into the weeds are we going there at that point?
Yeah, I don't know. It's like, Mo Bamba's not getting bought out. It's not
I
going
thought
to
about
happen.
Isaiah Hartenstein for them for a minute. That's a trade they could pull off. He's kind of fallen out of favor in New York, but again, now you're not playing him and Jokic together either.
No. You don't want to give up a lot for the 4 minutes of a playoff game that Jokic won't be on the floor. I just, not that Denver has a lot to give up, but that would be difficult.
And so let's get to this last one, which will be it's fascinating question. And so it's a twofold one, and we'll start with the question coming from the big fella. My question is, how many teams would you put in the one trade away category going into the trade deadline? For example, the Cavs, Heat, and Suns are all teams I would say need one more decent trade to put them in the full level of contention. How many teams do you put into that category given full health, of course? And so I separated it like follows, and I talked about this with you before we went into it. The don't need a trade. I want to see if you would add anybody to this. Boston, Denver, Memphis, and Milwaukee.
Maybe Brooklyn, and maybe Philly, but both of those teams could be improved by a trade. I just don't know. I could see them being in that discussion, but but the point is taken that those 4 teams you mentioned, if everybody's healthy, I think those right now are the 4 best teams and could get away with not doing anything.
I don't know what to do with the Nets. I had them in the one trade away category, but you brought up an interesting point that it's if Kevin Durant isn't healthy, you're just not in the title discussion. They're 5th in defense so far. So if it just comes down to whether Kevin Durant's healthy. Like, no trade you make. People have talked about a backup big. I think that's a little bit overstated just because you have Nick Claxton and Ben Simmons, and we're going to add another non-shooter to the equation. If it's Miles Turner, sure, but that's like one pretty massive trade away. So you know what? I'm going to add the Nets to the no trade one. You talked me into that.
Thank you.
I think the Sixers could probably still use some wing depth, so I'm going to have them one trade away. But here's my more than a trade away teams that are honorable mentions I think people might be expecting. I have the Clippers and the Mavericks in here, to where I don't think there's a realistic trade they could make that's going to make them title like favorites, contenders, a team that I believe is going to win the championship. I believe I'll receive the most pushback on putting the Clippers here.
That they're more than one trade away?
That people probably believe that they deserve to be in the no trade away discussion, or they're one trade away.
What about this season? I mean, the injury thing is like an injury to a team's best player takes all these teams out of it, basically. So like, except that the problem with the Clippers is we already know that their best players are just not necessarily injured, but not available. So I think I agree that there's not like a player out there that changes the Clippers' fate, in a meaningful way that they could realistically get. It could improve them, but it's almost like trades aren't even the issue for the Clippers, really, to me.
So you would agree with having those two teams in there then?
I'm good with that.
So here are my one trade away teams. And then we can get to targets very quickly. I know you have to get out of here too. I have the Miami Heat, Cleveland Cavaliers, New Orleans Pelicans, Golden State Warriors, Phoenix Suns, with the caveat that when you hear the trade targets, they're like one master trade away, and then the Philadelphia 76ers.
Okay. So the two that jump to mind first for me, I think I agree with those also, but the Warriors and the Cavs, and I'll just take the Cavs first. Like, we probably said it on this podcast. I already can't remember. We talk about it every time. They need a small forward. That's the piece to me that they need to get. The problem is, like, they just, again, reiterating, how do you go get a 3-and-D wing right now in a market that just really does not have them? What do you have? I don't have any solutions for that, because all of them are just like not interesting. Every write-up you see is just like super underwhelming. Jalen McDaniels maybe, but I don't know.
On the lower end, I would be curious, and I mentioned his name already, Damian Lee, if the Suns decide to sell, or just willing to, oh, hey, we're not going to have him around next season or something. That's just someone who's cost effective. But I have wondered, between Karis LeVert and second round draft equity, could you get Gary Trent Jr.? Or do you think there are going to be offers that just beat that?
I think that's a best case. That'd be great. I do. Trent isn't quite, I want like a 6'7", 6'8" guy if I could, to fill that spot. Trent's not quite that rangy, but he's been a steals monster in the past. I'd feel way better about him on, I don't know, Jason Tatum than Donovan Mitchell, or really maybe Mobley is the guy that has to guard him anyway. But yeah, something like that would be, I do that in a heartbeat, because I think LeVert is really superfluous on that team, especially with Rubio back.
The other thing, and this feels like the most realistic one, would you do, and it doesn't have to be any other money, Val, but just Karis LeVert for Josh Richardson. And if the Spurs want to give you some other money back, like you figure that out. But Karis LeVert for Josh Richardson, I don't know what the Spurs want with Karis LeVert. Maybe it's a 3-team scenario, like you sending Karis LeVert to Dallas, who's sending something to San Antonio. But if you're giving up Karis LeVert, first of all, you don't even need to give up Karis LeVert to get Josh Richardson. You could go something like Isaac Okoro and Jetty Osman, or Isaac Okoro and Dylan Windler. So something along that line.
If I'm the Spurs, I think I'm probably more interested in Okoro than LeVert. And
that's fair. Would you do Okoro and salary for Richardson if you're Cleveland? I would.
I think I would. I mean, I guess there's the possibility that Okoro finally, puts it together. He's still young, but I think if you're the Cavs, I think this is a right now thing. You don't know how long you're going to have Donovan Mitchell. You don't know how long. I mean, Mobley has upside. Allen is still young. Garland has upside, but if I can get the piece, and Richardson is not ideal, but I think he fits what you need more than LeVert does, doesn't he?
I think he can guard up the positional spectrum more. If you were looking for sort of just higher volume 3-point shooting and some on-ball jet fuel, I'd prefer the GTJ there. So I would make that trade if it's available. Mm-hmm. In theory, you can make both
Yeah.
If you're giving up Okoro, then that would really diversify their roster.
I'm going to throw it to you. We didn't talk about this. Do you have a Warriors one trade away target? I mean, other than Alex Caruso?
That's not. He would be my trade target over the summer if they don't think they're going to keep DiVincenzo. Him and DiVincenzo feel a little redundant.
Yeah.
So I don't know if this is a dream, but if the Warriors were, gonna adult up and go out, like Kyle Kuzma would be great for the Warriors, in my opinion. But my actual trade for them, are you ready?
I'm ready.
James Wiseman.
Yep.
Moses Moody.
Yep.
For Cody Martin, PJ Washington, Jalen McDaniels.
Man, so you're getting 3 guys you might be able to play. I don't hate that. I was really hoping you were going to find a way to get Anunoby, but I'm disappointed you couldn't make it happen for me. But
what is their Anunoby package? Is Wiseman, Moody, and 2 first-round picks?
Yeah,
that's getting
they don't really have the Anunoby package is the problem.
What was their Bojan Bogdanovic package that you were hinting at?
It was going to be Wiseman and Moody and the picks, basically, just to see if you're the Pistons, certainly more so than the Raptors, I think you should have interest in Wiseman and Moody as second draft guys.
Even with Jalen Duren on the roster, though?
Who cares?
Who's already better than James Wiseman?
Oh, yeah. Wait.
And Charlotte, by the way, has Mark Williams and Kai Jones and Nick Richards and Mason Plumlee, but I'm just like, if you can get James Wiseman, like, why not try that there?
Right. Yeah. No, so you're saying Martin, McDaniels, and Washington. And you're assuming that you're going to keep Washington in restricted free agency potentially, which you probably need to do.
McDaniels that makes a free agent as well. So you could also look at it as like, we'll keep at least one of these guys, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's so sad that that's I could see it. Like, it's so sad that that's where we are on that. What about Miami? I don't know. I guess Miami needs a big forward. So are we going to reunite the Martins? Are we going to put them together? Do you have
Kyle Kuzma was perfect for them if Washington's going to sell, and they have picks to give up. You would need to need to be more money going out because I assume you want to move Duncan Robinson. Also, Bojan Bogdanovic, they're a great destination. If you can get the Pistons to take on Duncan Robinson's deal, so you're compensating them for that and for Bojan, probably cost you 2 first-round picks at least, maybe even Jovic in there. He would be a perfect fit for them.
Does John Collins do anything for you in Miami?
Oh, he certainly does. What are you giving up to get him? Because it's Duncan Robinson and who? And why is Atlanta doing that trade?
Right. Yeah. I mean, you'd have to, Jovic is just the guy because the Heat don't have young players. Jovic would have to be in there, and then you've got to cobble together as many picks as you can. Although, again, who knows what Collins' trade value is? We talk about it every week. It feels like if it's really low, Jovic Robinson's salary is not good. So I don't know if the Heat have the draft capital. So assuming too that any first rounder you get from the Heat is probably not going to be in the lottery because they just don't really do it that way. That's tough for them to get the picks together, I think, to pull somebody like Collins away. Although who knows? Maybe the Hawks are just going to go in fire sale mode. It's hard to say.
Yeah. So it's just the Heat have the first round equity to get stuff done, and even you could move Victor Oladipo's salary, that short term commitment to that could facilitate Kuzma talks technically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. How are you getting Miles Turner to the Pelicans?
So I have him listed, but my actual targets for the Pelicans at this point, because I don't want to battle New Orleans fans who think that Jonas Valanciunas is somehow better than Miles Turner at this point. Let's just get them a chucker in there. And so Malik Beasley, Gary Trent Jr., and then here's one, kind of Bogdanovic of Atlanta.
Right. Everyone's available or should be, right, from Atlanta. Yeah, I agree. I think one more guy that you could put out there, and it's not like the Pelicans don't have, a handful of good shooters, but just having more volume, I think would matter if Trey Murphy's off or McCollum is not hitting, and Ingram ever plays again. That would be nice if he did. Beasley is a guy that I think could fit on Beasley to Memphis, even though I think we've said they're not a trade away. That's kind of the no-brainer. Although honestly, if I'm Memphis, I'm aiming higher than that if I'm going to make a trade. But just someone to come in and just bomb away if, Dylan Brooks is having a Dylan Brooks game in the worst way. I think that could put Memphis. Do you think Memphis or New Orleans needs a gunner more?
Ooh, I think Memphis, because if you have a healthy Zion, your half court offense is inoculated against this. The reason the Pelicans don't shoot threes is because I know the Memphis gets to the rim a ton too, but you're just designed around this like bowling ball that can move east to west and is just super explosive in Zion. So I think it's Memphis.
Yeah. Memphis has the more glaring half court offense problems, as you pointed out. So that should be
I
the solve.
I will say, just because I do want to see New Orleans get more of a floor spacing, like front court option in there that can give you maybe higher volume than Larry Nance Jr., I have Naz Reid listed for them as well. I don't know what it takes to get him out of Minnesota, but that was just, I thought about that. I also kind of thought, because he's all of a sudden high volume, Isaiah Stewart. I wonder what it would cost to get him from Detroit.
Well, once they have James Wiseman, they're not going to need him. So like they're really going to just be looking to give him away for pennies. Yeah,
The Suns. Are you
okay,
ready
well,
for
give me
this?
your Suns. No, give me your Suns guy. I was just going to say how I like. It's difficult to if we can't say Miles Turner, we're not allowed to anymore. It's hard to find the Miles Turner type for the Pelicans, but Naz Reid's a really good pull because he's kind of has some of the same characteristics. But
I
give
would
me
say
your,
Zeke Naji too, but I don't think the Nuggets would trade him, let alone trade him to a Western Conference foe. Where it's like if you're Minnesota, it's kind of like depending on what you're getting, this season's fucked. You have Rudy Gobert and Karl-Anthony Towns moving forward. How important is Naz Reid? And so depending on what the Pelicans are offering,
yeah. Who's your Suns guy?
guys, and this speaks to how far away they are from contention at the moment. I have Fred VanVleet or Pascal Siakam. Like those are the guys that you're. I think. Look, Kuzma, Eric Gordon, Boyan Bogdanovic. We can run through the gamut of just like if Chris Paul, who I think we've kind of we veered too far to like saying he sucks when I don't think that's the case. I just feel like he's a much lesser player. And I think a lot of this stuff is sort of colored by the Devin Booker injury, the fact that Jay Crowder isn't there, the Cam Johnson injury. DeAndre Ayton has been, I don't want to say terrible on defense. He's been bad. And I think we have to start confronting this idea that, hey, did Phoenix just sign a slightly above average big man to a max contract? And that could be a problem moving forward. I had thought about like, though, you could build like Ayton, even if, look, here's what I had thought about Ayton and the framework is Ayton and for Fred VanVleet. So like there's other stuff involved. Like is Chris Boucher coming back or Thaddeus Young to Phoenix as part of that? But like, would you're losing so much shot creation as Toronto, but they've been obsessed with searching for kind of a big. It would be more natural if you were going Ayton for Siakam and building stuff out there, but who has to send picks back in just the Ayton for VanVleet scenario? And I know people will say, Ayton has the no trade clause basically this year. Like he can veto. Let's just, I think he wants out of Phoenix. I think he would accept the trade anywhere.
Yeah.
And then VanVleet with Chris Paul and Devin Booker on the roster, I kind of don't care. I would play all three of those guys together and I just wouldn't care.
Yeah, I think VanVleet does create some problems there, and his player option and free agency also present problems. But on the other hand, no, I think probably Toronto is giving picks just because of the contract stuff. I mean, Ayton's overpaid, I think we agree, but like VanVleet, just the Suns might lose him,
True.
So I mean, there's addition by subtraction in theory, but like as bad as Ayton has been relative to expectations, like I don't think you're just looking to get off of his contract without getting anything, which would be a possibility. And I'm going to definitely need like, you're going to have to give me Christian Coloco or Boucher or, Precious Achua or somebody back that I can hang on to, in addition to VanVleet. But yeah, I think Ayton would be fine in Toronto. It would things would just like start to make more sense roster wise there. If he were that's your center now, no more of this messing around with, your 6'7" to 6'9" guy of choice playing center. I think I could get into that.
I think the trade would be Ayton and campaign for VanVleet and Boucher. The money works, and then just picks need to go, or you're talking prospects go back and forth there. That would be the framework. Who says no to that? Nobody does. It's a perfect trade.
I think it's perfect. I hesitated for a second, which means it's a perfect trade. I don't know who says no.
Finally, we have the Sixers who are they just can't make moves. They're just so like their picks, and they're so close to being below the luxury tax. They're going to duck it. But the two targets I have for them, they've been linked to like people who make all this money, like Eric Gordon, Boyan Bogdanovic. Like, no, it's not happening. You're not moving Tobias Harris as part of that trade. So the two names I have, Cody Martin and Josh Hart. And then like kind of the framework for what I have here is Matisse Thybulle and Daniel House, let's say, for Josh Hart, and then you would have to, because the Sixers want to duck the tax, like you compensate someone to take on Furkan Korkmaz,
Right.
and to take on Jaden Springer, or like, so that would be the route they go. But those are two targets I have listed for them, and I wonder if, like, does Daniel House a second and Matisse Thybulle, like, does that get you in the Josh Hart discussion? Does that get you in the Cody Martin's cheaper, so you wouldn't even need to go maybe that high, but like, let's say Matisse Thybulle and Korkmaz in a second, or I would, Daniel House has not been good this year, and so they tampered to get him, which is kind of disappointing. But
Yeah, I think I forget what I was working on, but the Sixers trading Korkmaz and or Tybal is just like one of the most guaranteed foregone conclusions just because of the tax situation. I hadn't thought about lumping them together to get someone like Hart, and I like that a lot more than trying to send them, to some place with a second rounder attached to get a guy making close to the minimum, so you duck the tax. I think, that is a concern, but the Sixers, if they can, should see if they can accumulate enough salary to get like a 10, $12 million guy. And I think Hart makes right around 12. And I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing if he's just off the books next year too. And you could go figure out with your, taxpayer mid-level, the next guy to fill that role potentially.
yeah, I think, like, so Hart makes 13, and so it would need to be something like you send Tybal and Daniel House to Portland, and then what can you give to, let's say, San Antonio? They have all this money, or even in Indiana, to take on the final year of Korkmaz's deal, or to take on, I mean, like, does someone even, like, if you don't care about your tax bill, I think Jaden Springer alone would do it. And so would San Antonio or Indiana just take him? Like, that's food for thought, but that would be, it would be a 3-for-1, and you need like a team to take on another player.
Yeah. I mean, if you're talking about Josh Hart, you could talk about Josh Richardson too. I mean, the salaries
Would they
are,
want to reunite with him? I like Josh Richardson for them, but I feel like Sixers fans might think that that's sacrilegious.
yeah, that's a tough look, like from
I might
a,
prefer to play him at the 4 than PJ Tucker at points
well,
right now, to be honest with you.
yeah, that's not exactly a homecoming anyone would welcome, but I mean, him and Hart are different players, but it's just another option at that number. Yeah, I don't know.
I mean,
Do we
Cody
need to,
Martin only makes 7. And so, like, you could technically lot money off onto the Hornet. Like, you could, Tybal and Daniel House, you duck the tax while getting Cody Martin, is a second round sweetener there. Like, do the Hornets value, oh, we have Matisse Tybal enough
maybe?
to, maybe? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think the fact that I mean, and Martin hasn't played a ton, but the fact that they just signed him again, it would seem weird for them to give up. But I feel like as quirky and as like really narrow as Tybal's uses are, I could imagine a team, certainly one with like nothing to lose, like a Charlotte or a San Antonio, just taking a flyer and like maybe our shooting coach can get him to make 35% of his threes, and we have a great defensive player that can stand in, like, that he's someone that I think still, in spite of how he's performed, you could talk yourself into some upside if you're a rebuilding team for sure.
And also, Philadelphia has a 2023 second. It's the most favorable from Atlanta, Charlotte, or Brooklyn. And so if you're Charlotte and you can kind of get control back of your own second, which is probably going to be like 32.
Yeah. I mean, the
So,
Charlotte Hornets just swinging deals to get control back of second rounders.
so very quickly to wrap up, DeAndre Ayton and campaign for Fred VanVleet and Chris Boucher, who says no.
I think the Suns say no unless you're giving me Koloko and picks and stuff. But that's all it would take, I think. I think you've got the framework.
Cody Martin for Daniel House, Matisse Thybulle, and that second round pick, who says no.
Nobody. That's happening.
And let's go. What would be the good last one here? Okay, the Warriors one. We got to give it James Wiseman, Moses Moody for Jalen McDaniels, Cody Martin, and PJ Washington. Who says
the Warriors say no because they're just never going to trade James Wiseman. Unfortunately.
I think that's, and Isaac Okoro plus Dylan Windler for Josh Richardson, who says no.
The Cavs sure as hell shouldn't say no, so I guess it's the Spurs, but I think they both should do that.
There you go. I think that's the. I don't even have like a fifth quick one to propose your way. Unfortunately, did you want to?
We didn't send John Collins anywhere. Good for us.
John Collins to Indy for Chris Duarte and Boston's and Cleveland's first round pick.
Ooh, I think they both do that. The Hawks clearly don't care about John Collins, so getting a couple of firsts would be good. And then I'm still very much team John Collins. If I can get John Collins, I think I want to do it.
There you go. 5 quick trades. Do you want to
Bang.
take us out of here? Thank you for
Sure.
staying so much later than you said you were going to.
No. Anytime we're gonna, I get to say yes or no to trades, I'm always on board. So I can destroy your hopes or validate them, one of the two. As always, thank you for listening, everybody. As Dan said at the top, please remember to rate, review, subscribe, give us those 5 stars on iTunes. Get rid of those Knicks downvotes, which I assume are still happening. I don't know, or maybe let's juice up those numbers. Follow us on our socials. Check out the links in the description, and also if you're watching this on YouTube, at HardwoodKnocks everywhere. Sometimes we're at _HardwoodKnocks. Just search for us, check us out, follow Dan and I. And finally, tell a friend, join our Discord. There's good talks in there. We get a lot of mailbag questions. Those are useful, and the discussions are always really knowledgeable, especially like the team specific stuff. So get involved if you're not. And last thing, shout out to one and only Frank Ntilikina, and to Jared Allen. As always, we apologize.